Everybody, so the thing that is extremely important for you to really understand on how to stop your stuttering once and for all, because I myself have ended up having a lot of experience already on how to stop my speech impediment. Since again, I will tell you this, guys, that back in 2021, I had ended up self-experimenting a lot. I had started that year, excuse me, on self-experimenting out my speech, and then I had ended up realizing how many techniques that had failed for me, unfortunately, and then afterwards I ended up having to create my own technique in order to actually be successful to ultimately and almost entirely stop my own stutter. So the whole idea here is this. That first is that I have to essentially wait for the mouth to naturally and subconsciously move to where it has to be inside of the right position. Now, guys, again, you have to remember that the brain already knows exactly how to move the mouth and also where to move the mouth. It's only a timing thing that you ultimately have to understand. And so the whole point is this. Wait for your mouth to move to where it has to be first in the right mouth position. So that means that sometimes the first and second letter of the word that you have in mind are set up simultaneously before you attempt to say the word out loud. So for example, the word university, for instance, I first have to use the mouth to set up the U and then shortly after the N. Okay, so the university, okay, it has to be there ultimately. Now, yeah, that second letter, the N, meaning it's not set up until after you try to say the word itself, of course. But again, the whole idea here that you truly have to just understand, everybody, is that if the brain hesitates, if it has doubt that it can't actually say the word out loud, it means a problem is happening, and you ultimately have to address the problem. And the problem ultimately comes along the way that the mouth hasn't even reached exactly where it has to reach yet inside of the brain processing. Okay, so the whole idea that you really have to understand and actually be a lot more patient as well is that the mouth needs to be there first. It has to be set up first so that the brain has no more hesitation. It has no more self-doubt that it can't say the word out loud. So again, guys, we have to self-experiment this over and over and over again. Trial and error process is going to help out a lot, especially. So the whole idea is that it has to be waited for the mouth to subconsciously move where it has to move. You do not have to be aware of it in the you having to relearn exactly where to move the mouth. Okay, that makes no sense at all, since the brain already knows how that's done. It's had so many years of experience already that this is a timing thing. Okay, so the whole point is this again, everyone. That first you have to move the mouth exactly where it has to be in the right position first, then afterwards have the intentionality and saying it out loud. If you swap the steps around, that's a hard block. So you have to do it inside of the correct order. Do not start swapping steps around where you first have the intentionality on speaking out loud and then having the mouth move. If someone is in a hard block already, good luck even thinking about moving the mouth, okay? So the whole point is this. It will seem impossible for you to ultimately do this if you are already in a hard block already. So this is why this is a preventative approach. It is not a reactionary approach. This is not a passive approach. It is a proactive approach. So you ultimately have to get into the habit of just essentially waiting for the mouth to reach where it has to reach first before you try to say the word out loud altogether, and it will help you out that much more. And I really guarantee you guys it will become, it will make you become that much more fluent in your lefts, because again, you just have to have a lot more practice with it, that's all. Mouth mechanics is for sure, no doubt about that, the answer on how to stop your stuttering once and for all, because again, if you have a lot of experience, then everything else falls into place, just like a domino effect. Everything else will ultimately just happen naturally, and you're going to speak that much more naturally. There is no stutter state inside of the background either. By the way, the stutter state is a feeling of the susceptibility that you are going to stutter even though you are not stuttering whatsoever. So that means that it is a slight mistiming of mouth mechanics, so the stutter state is easy to fix. So the whole idea, everyone, is again, you have to essentially set up the mouth in advance in order to say the word out loud, and also before you say the word out loud as well. The attempt cannot happen before the mouth even moves. If you see any videos online of somebody inside of a hard block, for example, then just stare at where their mouth is. I guarantee the mouth isn't even inside a proper position yet. So the brain gets way too ahead of itself. The intentionality and speaking happens way too quickly, and then what ends up happening is that the mouth has no time to move where it has to move, and that is why I know that stuttering is not caused by fear. It is not caused by social anxiety. Since again, guys, I've had a lot of anxiety, I've had a lot of fear inside of my life, and I've had a lot of conversations with myself, only for that matter. And yeah, every time I have a lot of conversations only with myself, I still have a lot of hard blocks and stutters, but no presence of fear whatsoever. So there is no fear at all, even if I have conversation with myself. So it just shows and proves that fear is not the cause of stuttering. And something else I will say again over and over again, but I've had a lot of presentations inside of high school and university, and the thing is this, that I had no speech impediments at all during the presentations. It was a very mysterious phenomenon that had taken place with the presentations. And that is again because the fear had actually made me so self-conscious, all kinds of people staring at me at once, that I had such a fear of embarrassment that the fear actually made me instead of break me. So the fear helped me out a lot in order to not stutter in those very moments during and throughout the presentations. So the whole point is this: fear is not the cause of your stutter. It cannot be the cause of your stutter. It is a correlation with your stutter. So yeah, someone is able to stutter more if they are in a social setting and if they have a lot more anxiety, but that is not the cause of the stutter. In fact, you do not even have to focus on stopping your fear at all to stop your speech impediment. It will not make any sense. So this is how to stop your speech impediment: is that you have to fix a processing problem that is happening inside of the brain, since that is the real cause of stuttering. So you need to essentially feed the brain. You have to give the brain information. You have to give the brain environmental input and essentially convince it and have a belief in yourself that you can say that next word. And how is that actually done? Well, you simply can't say over and over again to yourself, okay, say the word out loud, say the word out loud, say the word out loud, or I can say it out loud, I can say it out loud, I can say it out loud. Okay, that is not how stuttering is actually fixed. Stuttering is fixed by you knowing that the brain knows that it can actually process that first step by setting up the mouth first. If that gets short-circuited, then you are going to have a processing problem, unfortunately, guys. So that is why, again, the mouth has to actually be set up first so that it gets processed first. Then afterwards it gets set up. And then you can say the word fluently aloud. So the intentionality has to arise after the fact. It is secondary to the mouth setup. And again, this all happens inside of processing. So if you are already in a hard block, if you have already fallen into a really hard block, and if you somehow move the mouth exactly where it has to be, well, guess what? You are already inside of a hard block, so it will still not really unblock you for the most part. Anyways, sometimes it will, but it's very hard. That is why do not use anything as a preventative, as a reactionary approach. Mouth mechanics is a preventative approach all the way through, and it can ultimately help you out in order to stop your stutter. There is no doubt about that, because I've already had a ton of experience already experimenting this out over and over again. I've already tried out a lot of other techniques. I've tried breathing exercises, I've tried elongation, I've tried prolongation, I've tried accepting my speech impediment, and guess what? They all had ended up failing for me. Unfortunately, the only thing that had ended up working for me was what? My own technique that I had ultimately tried over and over again in order to master, since I knew that that was the answer back in 2021. And then afterwards, I had realized that, okay, so that is obviously the answer, and that is obviously how to gain a lot more fluency and mastery over my own speech, and how to stop and diminish my speech impediment for that matter. So again, guys, I will tell you this again, is that you have to buy yourself enough time for the first step. The processing has to take place of the mouth movement, and then afterwards is the processing of what? The intent on saying the word out loud, on you trying to say the word out loud, on you aiming to say the word out loud. This is how you can stop your stutter, guys, but you have to be really smart about it, since many stutters out there unfortunately fail so many times over. They really try to stop their own speech impediment, and they fail because they have a faulty theory. They have a false theory on how to speak the right way, on how to stop their stuttering. So this is how I know that I'm actually right, since I've already had a lot of trial and error, and I have already mastered the approach ultimately on how to really stop my stutter. Yes, I still stutter here and there, very, very, very rarely. In fact, that is a downside of actually having a speech impediment, only since even if someone is entirely fluent, they will be so focused on those insanely micro mess ups, those very small mess ups, that I can have and stuff, and yet that can be very annoying, obviously, except I guarantee you that most non-stutters out there actually will mess up like every 5 seconds anyways, except for those people, those non-stutters out there, no one really pays attention, right? So you can't even really hear them actually messing up, except if it's a guy who stutters, for example, then you are ultimately going to have your speech microanalyzed, and then every single fraction of a second you're going to get studied. Oh, okay, so he blocked, oh crap, and it's like not a block at all, right? And so the whole point is this, that it's actually better if you do not really tell somebody else that you have a speech impediment, or else they will microanalyze your speech the entire way through. They will have that expectation built in inside of their brain at that point in time that you will stutter, and so they're actually expecting you to stutter all the way through. And if you do not even have the perfect speech, then they will ultimately think that there's something off, okay? So the whole point, the whole idea, everyone, is that you have to be very intelligent about it, obviously, because I've already given you a lot of information on how to stop your stutter, and I hope that this can really help you guys out a lot, because again, I really guarantee that if you can have a habit of essentially speaking the right way, completely fluently for that matter, then everything else goes out the window, everything else helps you. In order to stop your speech impediment, you have to have a lot more practice, you have to have a lot more acceptance, you have to have a lot more conscious effort at first before the mastery of mouth mechanics, and then everything else ultimately happens and falls on its own, just like a domino effect. So the whole point, everyone, is that you really have to think about how to stop your stutter, because again, I will guarantee you, I've already shown you how it is already done. It is done by, again, setting up the mouth in advance, in position, before the intentionality and saying a word out loud. If these orders get swapped around, then you're going to have many mess ups, unfortunately, many hard blocks, as a matter of fact. In fact, the more distance there is between that ordering messing up, the stronger the block is going to be altogether.